many members from the Senate who I had served with in the House came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in running for the Senate, and I said yes. And I said yes because I wanted to represent the people of the towns and their issues. I have an interest in what is going on down in Augusta. I'm familiar with what's going on down in Augusta. I have been on the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee for 6 years, and I've also served on the Natural Resource Committee for 2 years. So that's kind of the background of me and where I come from and what I've done in my past. I also served 4 years with former Governor LePage, and I'm serving 4 years with Governor Mills. I get along fine with many of the Democratic members. We're friends. I think we together have accomplished some things. But at the same time, I believe the party has also passed some pretty bad bills. And the last 4 years, of course, it's all been controlled by one party down there. This is what's caused, I believe, a lot of inflation in this country, in this state. I think that's why you're paying more for electricity and food. One of the $850 checks you received, Governor Mills put a stipulation on that of anybody making $150,000 or more a year would not receive those checks. And that's a distribution of wealth. That's taking from the people who work and giving it to the people who may not be working. So different issues like that we need to talk about and we need to change. And I think that that's something that I can do and have enjoyed doing. And I also have the time to do it, which is important now that I have my son and my daughter running my business. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. We're now going to go to questions from the floor. As moderator have already said that we're going to take one question per person, and then if there's time, you can ask a second question. I'm going to ask those of you who have questions to come, and I'm going to take 3 at a time. So if you'll queue up, someone will go to the mic. If you have a question, let's move this along because we want to get as many questions in as possible. You're going to need to speak into the mic, so step forward. And if anyone else has a question, I'm looking for 2 more people, so come up to the microphone. State your name, where you're from, and your question is all to all the candidates.
Thank you. I'm George Schelling. I'm from Orland. My question is, do you believe climate change is caused by human activity? And what steps would you take in Augusta to relieve the impact of climate change in Maine? Thank you.
All right, this is to all 3 of you. Who wants to go first? Mr. Lyford.
I think
Yeah, let's shut that off, I guess. It's better, hopefully. Mr. Lyford, and then we'll go to Mr. Russell.
Let's try that. I think certainly climate change has been in human impact has made a difference on it. Certainly when this earth was created, there were very few people, and now there's 300 million people just in this country. Yes, I think that's certainly, but of course the climate has been changing since the beginning. You know, there was 3 miles of ice over this church right here now at one time. But what can we do in Augusta? Well, I think we're headed down the right road with things like heat pumps that will save us money and energy, getting away from, working our way from fossil fuels. Now, I think the way we're doing fossil fuels right now is incorrect. I think being, shut off is not a good idea. I think that we need to work slowly. I think there are places for electric vehicles, for instance, like in the Portland or Boston area. I question on how good the,
Yeah, I think because there's an issue with the older sound system, I can turn it down if you'll speak more closely.
closer to my mouth, okay. Where was I? Okay, I think, in rural areas, it may not be such a good idea. So we can start there, but we have to be careful that we don't put more burden on the individual taxpayers in this state. I mean, we are taxed to death, so we've got to work very carefully at that.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. The question's going next to Mr. Russell and then to Mr. Hutchins.
Well, I mean, for me, I followed the work that the Governor's Climate Council has done. I thought the way it was set up was the right way to go. I think it's made some, steps so far that are definitely in the right direction. I do want to address, though, we had another forum, and Sherm thought that the term that I think the governor used is "we can't wait."
Maine.
Well, what is it?
Maine.
Well, Maine can't wait. I think we're kind of all Maine here, but Maine can't wait. So I have a little bit of perspective on this, maybe different than the other two candidates. I was 42 years in the automobile business, and I've followed it, what's going to happen, and I know that the U.S. auto business has been ready to go for a while. But it isn't a whole lot different than when the early automobiles started replacing horse and buggies. The initial Fords that Henry Ford built and many other car manufacturers were unbelievably expensive. I mean, in real terms back then, they were $3,000 to $7,000. Then in 1910, along came Henry Ford, who developed a Model T. He started in 1910 and they were $900. And when they reached their peak, building 2 million a year, in 1923, a basic Model T was $260. And this pattern has been followed in our country for years and years and years. I mean, if you wanted a large-scale television when they first came out, you had to spend thousands of dollars. You can probably get a 55-inch television now for $400, and they might have been $3,000 or $4,000 to start. The auto business needs scale, and with scale comes progress. So I'm going to use another country as an example. This year, the largest new vehicle manufacturer in the world, which is China, that'll build 27 million new cars. 30% of those will be EVs, electric cars. It's a big country just like us. And, they're building infrastructure, and we're sort of getting left behind. We're not a country like that. I mean, we took on big things before. Things like, World War II, we manufactured, we turned our manufacturing into something that really won that war. And we can convert, and we need to do it now, because the manufacturers need to do it now. They've spent millions and billions of dollars developing these cars, and yet we're suggesting that we need to wait. I mean, this country's only 8%. We're way behind on this. We can do it. Many people need to assess how they drive, and they'll be able to use a car. And there are cars that go 300 and 400 miles now. But it's got to get rolling. It's got to get going. And we need to do it. Gene and I put 2 solar panels in our field 8 years ago. Somebody came in and said, how much you're paying a month for electricity? We told them over 2 years. They gave us a loan for 12 years at that same payment. And we're 9 years in. We've produced a megawatt or 100 megawatts of electricity. We can do it. It does work. I remember listening to Dick Hill and Tom Gosey, and Dr. Hill would say, we'll never get there. 20% of our electricity output right now is renewables. So all this can be done, and we need to do it, and we need to protect people till it gets to the point where everybody can do it. Yeah, I mean, it's comes out now, they're expensive, and they're gonna go down, and they're gonna work. There's things coming along like in and out batteries. Heat pumps are a great idea, that's part of it. You know, pushing solar is part of it. There's a lot that we've developed. We as a country, as a state, can do this, we need to do this.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins.
Yes, thank you. It's a great question, and it's a difficult answer because what's happening in the state of Maine, we have about 7,000 electric cars in the state, and there are 1 million gas cars. That probably will take a century to reverse those numbers. And so the fact that we're working towards that isn't a bad idea. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't work towards a cleaner environment. Bucksport is a perfect example of that. 30 years ago, Bucksport wasn't a place you brought people to visit because it wasn't a very clean place. Today, it's one of the nicest places on the Maine coast to come visit because the people of Bucksport slowly and steadily improved this place to the point where it is a showpiece today, and it truly is. It's a wonderful town to come to. And the same thing is going to hold true for changing our environment from something that depends on fossil fuels to something that depends on electricity that isn't made with fossil fuels or with coal. And that's what's driving a lot of what's being done today. A lot of the components to things that we are putting in the fields all over Maine for solar collectors are built in China with coal-fired plants. So, I mean, we think we're doing a great job while someplace else in the world is increasing their output. And you want to remember there are 8 billion people in the world. 3 billion live kind of like we do. 5 billion keep warm and cook their food with scrap wood and dry dung. Those people deserve to have a better lifestyle. And to get it will require them to harness power. And the cheapest power they will be able to harness is fossil fuel, just like we did 100 years ago and 200 years ago, or hydropower. And they will do those same things. As we slow down the use of fossil fuels, they will increase the use of fossil fuels. So it's not just a simple thing that those of us that want to try to be more environmentally careful aren't making all the decisions. There are decisions being made all over the world that are going to nullify a lot of what we do. So what I meant when I complained about the governor talking about Maine can't wait is kind of like the kid in the candy store. He can't wait, doesn't care what he gets for candy as long as he gets something. And that's basically what happened with the governor's program, not just in the state of Maine, but all over the country, trying to quickly change to a power supply that doesn't rely on fossil fuels. But it does, even though we may hide it some because we're buying a lot of the components from other parts of the world where they make things with no environmental standards at all. And so in some respects, these types of improvements that we are making come at the expense of the environment because it's worse somewhere else. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'm looking for, you're gonna have to come to the mic, and if you wanna get in the queue, there are 3 seats in the front here. You can sit and wait, but just to get the process going, folks. All right, please state your name, where you're from, and please give your question.
Joyce Schelling from Orland. Maine has surpassed Florida in the percentage of residents who are older than 65, sort of like here. The average age of our citizens is also the oldest in the country. Without younger people to take over the jobs of those who retire, our economy will suffer. What have you done about this, and/or what would you hope to do?
Thank you. The question we'll start with Mr. Russell, and then we'll go down to Mr. Hutchins, and then we'll go to Mr. Lyford.
Well, I think some of the things that we can do is encourage people to do what they've done in this town. So Main Street Bucksport is part of the Main Street America program. Its mission is to make rural downtowns more vibrant and attractive to young people. So one thing we need to do is do that at the state level as well. We need to attract young people to this state. We also need, I'm not sure we can do it at our own level, but certainly we could encourage at the federal level that there are all kinds of people in this state and lots of states that are awaiting their hearing to seek asylum in this country. It's the law. I mean, if we don't want that as a law, then we ought to change it. But right now it's the law. And there's a law that goes along with it that says for 180 days, these people can't work. Now, there's not a one of them that doesn't want to work. That just makes no sense to me. You know, and then the other thing it says is that these people come here and commit crimes and use our services and everything else. They don't want to do that. They want to work. So I don't know if there's a way we can, the people that are in our state, we can help find them jobs and put them to work because they want to work. They don't want to commit crimes because if they want to leave before their hearing, that's the quickest way out of town. So I think we have to, you know, in our education system, we need to make this a place where young people can get an education and not be saddled with debt. We need to do whatever we can there. We need to alter our system to teach our young people and develop programs where they take over businesses and they remain in the state. I ran into one of Sherm's relatives that stopped me the other day. Wonderful guy. You know, I knew the family when I was young. I knew Sherm's family. His father built my folks' house. It's still standing proud and, you know, well done. But he was saying that he can't get anybody to work. And that's because there's nobody here that can work. So we need to develop programs where he doesn't need to worry that his business that he took over from his father can continue. So I think that we've got to look at any innovative way that we can. We've got to bring broadband across the state. There's federal money available. We need to, you know, use it and get it so that people that can work remotely can work here. There's no question that we need younger people here. We need to do everything and be innovative to get them here. So that's what I would certainly try to do.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Mr. Hutchins.
Yes, thank you. I think your question was actually keeping older people here. And one of the ways to do that is to, no, it wasn't?
Come back to the mic. Apparently there's some question about your question. Listen up, please.
Yeah, we have a lot of older people here. But we need those younger people to take over the jobs of those who are going to retire, because otherwise our economies will fail. So, or will suffer. So what have you done about, what I'm talking about is getting enough younger people here, and what do you hope to do?
I see what you're saying. That makes good sense. One of the first things that we need to do is to make sure that this is an affordable state to live in, and it isn't at this point. Part of it appears to be at this point because we have spread so much of the federal money around that was passed out all over the country, and it's, you know, close to $4 trillion, I think, at this time in the last couple of years, and it's still a couple of years worth in the works. But as that comes to an end, it's not going to be a pretty sight. It's going to be difficult to make that up. And one of the things that in the state of Maine is a perfect example. One of the first things that Governor Mills did when she came into office was to put many, many more people on the Medicaid. And there were 55,000 young, by young we mean 18 or 20 to about 48, I think it was. I think it was 55,000 of those folks that were childless, that their expenses were taken over on health and housing. And that's 55,000 people that should be working, and should be working every day. And most of them, many of them aren't, because if they did, they would lose, you know, some of those benefits. And so some of the problems that we have are self-inflicted. And in the process of trying to be nice to everyone, well, the nicest thing you can do to anyone is to make sure they're working. There's nothing more satisfying than at the end of the year or the month or the week to know that you have been productive, you're supporting your family. There's a lot of pride goes with that. And if we don't continue encouraging that type of thing, we're going to have a lot more of these problems. And one of the ways to encourage it is to reduce taxes. Regulations should be streamlined. We don't do away with regulations to start businesses, but you make sure that they're streamlined and working properly, so that someone like my son, who's sitting over here, that builds docks, doesn't have to wait a year for a permit to build a dock that 4 years ago he was waiting 2 and 3 weeks for the permit. Same permit, same docks. He's been in that particular business for 20 years now and has never had a black mark against him. So you would think when he put an application in, like hundreds of other people put applications in, that it would be turned around in no time. But at this point, under this governor, those same permits take a year and more sometimes. So by speeding up some of this type of activity would be a big help. We have over 250 boards and study groups in the state. They happen lots of times when a piece of legislation isn't going to make it through. It gets turned into a study group, or so that the person that has the bill doesn't have to say, well, I failed. Well, I didn't fail because I got a study done. Well, all these studies cost a lot of money, and all of that comes out of taxpayers' pockets. And I think there's something like 240 of these study groups that work around the state, and the majority of them don't have enough people in them to actually work, so that when they meet, they actually can't do much of anything because they don't have quorums. But those types of things can make a huge difference if we can rely on people to get themselves to work, to get their ambition, and it's such a rewarding thing to be able to succeed at work.
Thank you. Mr. Lyford, the same question.
Thank you.
They don't like you.
Back. How's that? How's that? I turned it up.
Is everyone else's?
How's that? Yeah. Oh, okay. You there? You're absolutely right. This state has a ton of things to offer people. I mean, look at the tourists that flock here, you know, from the Rocky Coast to Aroostook County, Sanford, Portland. That's all great area. We have the jobs. You can't go anywhere without seeing, you know, we're now hiring. We're paying, I had my secretary was telling me this morning that her son, who works for Bangor, Bath Iron Works, they had a baby and it wasn't all covered by insurance, so he took a second job to pay that off as a dishwasher at $18 an hour. You know, my granddaughter graduated from the University of Maine this spring and she's in Nashville. So I'm disappointed, and of course, in that she's not here, but we have that, but we have got to lower the costs. Both of these gentlemen are right. We've got to, I know Governor Mills, when she ran 4 years ago, one of her campaign messages was that if she's elected, she would drop 0.5% off the sales tax. It's at 5.5, it would go back to 5. It's never happened. We've got to lower the income tax down. These taxes are just strangling and discouraging companies that have nice jobs from coming here. So I think that we have people here that can stay here, young people. I guess I don't know how much more than we can attract them than what we have here. I mean, what can we develop that would put them here? We have jobs, you know, we could have more jobs if we had more industry. But for the time being, I think that we have a lot to offer people, and I see a lot of people moving here, young and older folks.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. We're going to go to question 3. Someone else with a question, please come to the front and be ready to go.
So hi everyone, I'm Tracy Hare and I live in Bucksport, but I work in Orland, and for 18 years I've worked in homeless services. Maine, and actually all of New England, is on the precipice of having the most unsheltered population we've had in our history. Shelters are at capacity. My question is...
Speak into the mic, Tracy, and just raise it.
Shelters are at capacity. Just last week we visited some tent sites and those people were at work, so we weren't able to connect with them. My question for all of you is, do you support setting measurable goals for reducing and ending homelessness in our region? Why or why not? And I'd be happy to hear ideas on that.
Mr. Lyford, Mr. Hutchins, and then Mr. Russell. Mr. Lyford, please.
Well, certainly we want to end homelessness. We probably never will. There'll always be homeless folks around here, but we need to watch over them the best we possibly can. Affordable housing, boy, that's a tough one. I mean, it's just tough to build affordable housing for folks. You know, purchase of land and materials, the way everything is skyrocketed up now. I think that we could do more with health for these folks, because a lot of these folks that are homeless, you know, are probably on some type of a drug. And if we can continue to work at that and get these folks off that, I think we could reduce homelessness. You know, Governor Page, remember he proposed a mental health hospital in Bangor. It never got built. Troy Martin, the sheriff of Penobscot County, said that a lot of his inmates over there have mental health problems. And as soon as they're released, they go back to homelessness. So those type of people need to be moved into a hospital and helped. But I think a lot of it certainly is drugs. I think they're just getting worse and worse and worse.
Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you. Hey, your mic works over here. Peter is right about what we need to do to make sure that homeless folks and drug-addicted people get the proper care they do. But again, one of the things that we were talking about, affordable housing, we were talking in the legislature not too long ago about some affordable housing that was built in Portland. at an average cost of $340,000 per apartment for affordable housing. And we did the same thing. And what's the sense in that? And the thinking, evidently, of the people of Portland was that the affordable housing had to be a part of downtown Portland. Now, I agree it has to be a part of an area where there is perhaps transportation, and public transportation and that type of thing, because these people probably, many of them wouldn't have vehicles. But a $340,000 apartment, considering that affordable housing, you know, $1 million does 3 of those. Well, you know, $1 million would buy a lot of mobile homes that could be in a nice trailer park. Look at the wonderful trailer park that's over just the other side of Ellsworth that used to belong to the businesses. It's a wonderful trailer park, and I'm sure there wasn't $340,000 for each unit for something like that. So there needs to be an awful lot more thought given into how much we spend on this stuff and how many people we can help if we don't spend in the middle of Portland $340,000 for a affordable apartment. That's not affordable for anybody.
Thank you. Mr. Russell. Sorry, I'm keeping track so I give everybody different turns.
So I know it's a problem, and I think that problem is probably different in different places. In Portland, I suspect there are people that have a hard time buying a place that inexpensive. Now that may be more than the average house here in Bucksport, but I've kind of followed real estate. I have a couple of properties in Bucksport that I bought, and you know, Bucksport homes are approaching that $250 to $300 for a regular house, and many are more. So that may be the reality. And in Portland, it may be affordable for more people than we know. I think the wage scales are different there than they probably are here. So what are the solutions? I think they're different in other places. Sherm may be right, you know, a good trailer park that's done the right way. I have no idea what Mike Hawes' places cost out there, but I suspect they're probably closer to that $300,000 than you know. I talked with him a lot. He did a nice job. He put the wires underground. He did all kinds of things. He's got seniors moving in there, and they're manufactured homes. But I'm going to guess with the rent that he charges and everything else, in terms of a mortgage on your own piece of land, it might be the same thing. So, you know, what do we do? What do we do about homelessness? I think that was sort of the question. And I mean, I ran into it going door to door. I met a woman in Penobscot that told me about a young man that's in a wheelchair, is in a car accident at 19. He's now 29, and he's on the street. And I said, I have a daughter-in-law that's, you know, works for an agency, and I thought maybe she could help. She happened to have the same injury that he did. And so I said, well, have him call me if you want. He called me. He was in Northern Light, you know, because he had an infection. And the next day they released him onto the street in a rainstorm. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I don't know how he survived. And there was, you know, I made calls. I'm on the board of the United Way. I've worked with agencies. I've worked with people. Dead end, dead end, dead end, dead end. It just didn't seem like this is who we are. There's one thing that Tracy said in there. She said that we couldn't find the people that day because they were all at work. I thought these people weren't working. They're working, they still can't find a place to live. They can't find a place that they can afford, or the ones they can afford are all full. So what I know, and Sherm I know in our other forum, I think one answer you gave to the Maine Can't Wait was maybe we ought to study this. Well, there's another one of those committees. I thought that one that we had already done it. But I would turn to people like Tracy. She knows more about the homeless population than probably I'll ever know. And other people, and try to get them together. And are there too many regulations for the type of housing we need? My guess there probably is. And I think they're right. And if it's true that a young man, Sherm's son, has got to wait a year to put a dock in that he used to have to wait, call me about it. That's something I'd want to work on. That doesn't sound right. I have no idea what that is. So I don't understand why we couldn't get together and figure this out. So I think that's what we need more of. We need more of working together on issues like this that are serious, that need to have people from all parts of this, people that do housing, people that deal with the homeless like Tracy does. And we got to get together and look for solutions. I've done a lot of reading lately on innovative ways for housing. I've seen a couple in the Bangor Daily lately. There's other things that we can do. There's other things that's happening around the country. I just think we need to pull out of the stops to figure this out. And I really haven't met all these people that aren't working. And I don't know if these people have drug problems or not. If they do, we certainly need to help them.
Thank you. We're going to the fourth question. I'm going to ask the candidates to kind of be succinct while answering the question. I would like to get through as many as possible. So I don't want to shortchange anybody, but just think through. Yes, your name and your
Sandy
question.
Blanchette, Orland. I volunteer about 20 hours a week in an office. Plus, I've seen people other places as well. And we can do all these really great projects, but today's a beautiful warm day, and a lot of us could turn our heat off. But it's not going to stay that way. And people come and talk to us and say two things. I'm afraid I'm either going to starve or freeze to death this winter. Not talking about after study, I'm talking about next month. What can be done about this crazy inflation? Thank you very much.
Thank you. The question will go first to Mr. Hutchins, second to Mr. Russell, third to Mr. Lyford. Gentlemen.
First, I might mention about the study group that the governor used for the, for a better word, Green New Deal program that goes on in the state. It was a 38-member committee. My seatmate, who sits beside me, was one of the members of it, was never called to go to a meeting because he was a Republican. The 38-member committee was a yes ma'am committee, like many of these committees are. And when I said it needed to be studied, I mean it needed to be studied correctly. And that's why I have problems with the term Maine can't wait, because it means you'll take anything that comes down the road, whether it's well thought out or not.
Right.
And what was the other part of your question, Sandy?
They're afraid they're going to either freeze to death or starve to death.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a distinct possibility for many people. We talk about the inflation rate right now being 8-9%, somewhere through there. Well, a number of years ago, food and fuel were taken off the figuring of the inflation. Well, if they were back on there now like they used to be, inflation rate would be 25% probably. You know, we're in a world of hurt right now, and we have to stop the bleeding. We have to get people back to work, and we have to make sure that we are good stewards as we do it, but we have to get people back to work, and this administration isn't going to do it at the rate that it's working.
Mr. Russell.
It's definitely a serious problem. Like I said, I'm on the United Way board, and I commend you for your volunteer work. I mean, we need more of that. That's certainly a solution. I know their heat-a-thon that they run with News Center 2, they're gearing up to do that even more. So I think it has to come from all sides. It's got to come from the nonprofit side. It's got to come from
regular people working. We certainly could encourage, I know it's a national thing, but there are record profits at the oil companies. I don't know, I would think this could be something that's pushed. The Northeast is the place in the country that relies upon heating oil more than any place else. It's definitely going to be a problem. It's definitely something we as neighbors and friends need to think about. I think the state has got to be involved. I know they have oil assistance programs. I hope that that I can get there and find out, what they are and work on them some more. As far as food prices, there is something, though, Chairman, I would say there's a figure called core inflation, that there's two really inflation numbers, and you can look them both up, and they track them both. One does have them in, one does have them out. But, it's too high. I mean, I remember when to buy a car you had to pay 18%. That was the first bout of inflation way back, and it was worse than this in some ways, not in others. So I guess I would say that I'd approach it from all sides. I'd try to be active at the state. I would still continue the volunteer work that I do and other people do. I would encourage it at the town level, because they have to watch out for their citizens just as much as at the state level and everybody else.
Thank you. Mr. Lyford.
Yeah, inflation is a good question, and what's the choice between food and fuel and medicine? How do we get a control on inflation? Well, the first thing we need to do is this solar and wind thing is just absolutely cost you, every one of you, more money. Through poor legislation in Augusta, they are paid 400% over market price. If we're buying electricity for 6 cents from Cousins Island, like CMP, they're getting 24. Now you add those together and you send that out to the customer. Refrigeration in the food, IGAs and Shaw's and Hannaford, I mean, they're the biggest users of electricity, because those coolers, that air goes right out, so they have to keep making it. And they have to put the price up onto the food. So, I'm not against solar and wind. I'm against you folks paying for solar and wind. This gentleman put his own solar up, and he paid for it. We shouldn't have to pay for these solar farms that are going up. That's one way. There isn't any reason that people shouldn't have food. There are plenty of places to get food. The food cupboards. I mean, I volunteer, my wife and I volunteer at the Clifton United Baptist Church food cupboard. It's gone from 10 people to 80 people. There's plenty of agencies around. Look at how we go and raise money for fuel assistance. Also, Governor Mills, I think she's had a lot of money to spend, and it has not been accountable. It's been spent, but I won't say where it went. And a lot of that money should have been put aside. In other words, you don't have to, do you spend all your money that's in the checkbook? That has been spent, every dime of it, just as fast as it could be. We should have saved some of that. We got a big winter coming, and we could help people with that extra money.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. We're going to the fifth question. I'd like to get a couple of other people up front waiting to go, please. If you have a question, please take a seat up front.
My name is David Wida. I live in Bucksport. And this is a simple yes or no question. On November 6th, 2012, Maine voters approved a bill for the legalization of same-sex marriage by a margin of 53 to 47%. If you were to become a state legislator and this law came up for a vote, would you vote to retain the legalization of same-sex marriage, or would you vote to overturn the legalization of same-sex marriage in the state of Maine?
All right, and we're going to start with Mr. Hutchins. No, I'd start with Mr. Hutchins. Let me see. Mr. Russell, and then Mr. Lyford, and then Mr. Hutchins, please.
I would vote, I gotta get this right, but to leave it in place.
Thank you. Mr. Lyford.
Being a Christian, I don't think there's two things you can't govern with. That was out God and the Bible, so I certainly would oppose it.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. Mr. Hutchins.
I also had problems, I thought, with gay marriage years ago, but we haven't seen it be a problem in our everyday lives. We have friends that are gays and lesbians that are married, and so I don't see the sense in trying to outlaw that again.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. Are you up for a question, sir? Please state your name and then your question.
My name's Dick Campbell. Whoops. Or put it on. My name's Dick Campbell. I used to represent the town. I'm disappointed I'm still not, but full disclosure, I was a member of the Climate Council when it got established. And we'll just call it dynamic tension. So it really doesn't do a lot, but maybe it's changed in the last 2 years. My question is, there's always been a debate about big, dirty money in campaigns. How did each of you finance your campaign? How much money did you raise? How did you spend your money? Where did you spend it? In Maine, out of state? And is $15,000 for a House race and $65,000 for a Senate race too much clean election money?
Can you reduce that, please, to one question, sir? That was several questions.
That is one question.
I'm asking you to put it in one question.
How did you finance your campaign? How did you spend your money? And did you spend it in state?
All right. Mr. Lyford, Mr. Russell, Mr. Hutchins.
The state has a program called Clean Elections. You can qualify for that by going out and asking for $5 checks, and every time you get a certain amount of checks, you are allocated, you know, a certain, like $4,000 or $5,000. I was fortunate, and I raised $30,000, and I used, to date, I've used about 14,000 of it. The rest of it will go back to the state. It is absolutely too much money. If elected, and our party has any kind of control in Augusta, I would definitely reduce it to half of that. So, and all of the money that I received, and understand now that's taxpayer money. All of that money was spent absolutely in the state of Maine. Most of it with the Bangor letter, but it was spent right here in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. Mr. Russell.
I'm also a clean election candidate. I think that's right, Peter. And I didn't know a lot about it before this. I found out about it, and I probably could have afforded a campaign myself. I certainly knew folks that would probably support a campaign, but I elected to go that way really for one reason, and that's because I do believe, I think Mr. Campbell said, there's too much money in elections, and I think it's one of the problems with our elections, and it comes in at you even when you have nothing to do with it. So I went that route. Essentially, you can contribute $100 to the campaign yourself, and your wife can contribute $100. You can raise up to $1,000 of seed money. I look to my family, and they can give up to a $100 contribution. I looked to my family for that and didn't quite make it, but I got $900. So that's what I got. I bought some stamps at the Bucksport Post Office, you know, quite a bit, because I'm going to send out a thank you postcard. And then you go out and you solicit $5 contributions to the Clean Election Fund. And every time, you have to get 60 to be declared a candidate. After you get 60 of those contributions, you are a clean election candidate, and then they disperse some funds at the rate of $1,375 for every 15 you get. So in the beginning, I think I got a check for $4,000 something, and they deduct off your seed money, if I'm correct. So that counts towards the money you get. After that, they go in tranches of 15, every 15 of those contributions you get. And people, when they go to the website, they have to elect to make that to the Clean Election Fund in your name. It's really easy. You just click on it, it highlights either Sherm or I, and you do it. So then through the Democratic Party, which I forgot to say in the beginning, I'm running as a Democrat, I think I was supposed to. They kind of set you up very quickly and sort of tell you how to do it, and then they offer you some packages from a very small company in Portland called Frame Media Strategies. And they help you get a palm card together, which I did not, well, initially they said, well, get it here, it's way cheaper. It was a little bit. I didn't really want to, and I needed some right away, so I went to Down East Graphics. They were perfect. So they had already mistakenly put in this order, and I believe the company's in Massachusetts. They came, and I was very orange. And I said, well, I didn't even order them anyway. They took them back and did not charge me. I had my posters made at Down East Graphics. And then I picked a package that offered 3 mailers. You couldn't customize them very much, and I did those through this Frame Media Strategies. And that was it. I thought I was done. I'm going to run, I have a couple of ads running with the money I received, all the tranches except for one, so I think I got about $13,000 some $100. I'm not going to use it all. Any that you don't use, I'm going to send it back. I was surprised to see that 2 other mailers came in the mail that I knew nothing about that came from the Democratic Party. And I know in some of these other races, all kinds of money come from these dark money things that come in from out of state to help people, whether they want the help or not. So the 2 things to me are this. I think the clean election strategy is the right one, and if the country could work that way so that and really my main reason I haven't even told you was so that anybody else that wanted to run, Sherm or anybody else that wanted to run for this job had the same opportunity that I did. To me, that's fair. Okay? It's not fair if I have more money than somebody else that wants to run. And I do think that this outside money should be gone. But it can't be because of a national decision called Citizens United. In fact, a lot of that, quote, dark money, you don't even know who it is. To me, this is no way to run an election. It's no way to run a campaign. I feel proud that I did the clean elections. I would not have bought 3 mailers if I knew somebody was going to do 2 other mailers. I didn't want you to get 5 mailers in your mailbox. It's too much for this. So that's how I feel about it. I think it's a good program. I think the programs outside of it are not good programs.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Mr. Hutchins.
Yes, thanks.
One little thing.
Why not?
So the last time you said 30 years ago my mother wasn't in favor of it. Sort of correct. She was a longtime loyal Republican. I respect her for it immensely. What she objected to was the word clean.
Right, yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
And, you know, to her, it should say public election funds money or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with that at all.
We're going to Mr. Hutchins.
I would like to see the name of it changed, but of course that's what passed it to start with, calling it clean election. I don't use it. I never have because I just don't feel right about using it. And I have come to accept it more than I once did. And I can see especially somebody running for the first time that has a lot of great ideas and no money Well, you know, maybe that does make some sense. So I'm not as anti-clean election as I once was. But I still say to you that anything government gets their hands into, financing elections, it makes it cost more money.
Thank you. All right. Are you up for a question, sir? Please come to the microphone and state your name and your question.
My name's David Tarr. Thank you all for running. I'm from Brooklyn, so... Oh, is it on? No.
Thank
Okay.
you.
My name's David Tarr. I'm from Brooklyn, so I'm a little out of your districts here. I represent Zone C fishermen on the Zone C Council, District 1, and I serve on the Lobster Advisory Council for the state of Maine. I'm a second-generation lobsterman. We're getting hit with a lot of stuff with these whale lawsuits and you know, just getting hit pretty hard with that. And now we have to contend with wind in the Gulf of Maine, wind power. Just quick answer, yes or no, I guess. Just do you support having wind turbines in the Gulf of Maine, despite any environmental damages they may do, or do you oppose them? That's
All right,
something
thank
we're
you.
fighting.
It is a yes or no question. Let's limit the answer to yes or no. We'll start with Mr. Hutchins and go to Mr. Lyford and then Mr. Russell.
Yes, thanks, David. I oppose offshore wind and have for a couple of years now.
Thank you. Mr. Lyford.
Certainly oppose offshore wind.
Thank you. Mr. Russell.
Sorry, I don't know enough about it. I need to speak with people like David and know the issue, so I have to reserve it this time.
Okay. Other people with questions, please come to the front. There's a couple of seats up here, so I'd like to get a queue going, please. If you intend to ask a question tonight, please get up here. Otherwise, we're going to do something else.
Hi, is this on?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Maggie Williams. The state of Maine has long had a law that upholds the right of women to have an abortion as part of their reproductive health and choice for their families, for themselves. If you're elected, will you uphold a woman's right to choose in the state of Maine to have an abortion?
Is that a yes or no question? I would say so. Let's go yes or no.
Well, I'd like to say yes or no, and why.
Yes
Thank
or
you.
no, and why? Okay, let me see how I set this up. We'll go to Mr. Lyford, then Mr. Hutchins, and Mr. Russell. Mr.
There is a law on the books now in the state of Maine on abortion. I'd honor that. I am opposed to abortion.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins.
The law on the books now, like he says, is to codify what had been in Roe, and 60% of the country believes in not outlawing abortion, but also 60% believes in not letting it happen after about 9, 10, 12 weeks. And after a number of gestations back and through the legislature, that's probably where most of the country and states will end up.
All right, Mr. Russell.
I would leave the laws stand and fight anything that went to change it. So for me, as a principle, I do not think the government should be involved in a woman's right to, choose her own health course and where it goes. There are restrictions. It's at viability. I do believe that that's a reasonable approach. I don't know enough about 9 or 10 weeks, but my understanding is at 9 or 10 weeks, many women have no idea they're pregnant. So that does not seem reasonable to me at all. It makes no sense. That is an effect for most women, probably outlaws abortion. So
You're in support of women's rights?
yes, I am.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking for other people with questions who have not yet asked a question. Is there anyone who has a question, you've not asked it? This is the time. Okay. About which? If you keep it real short, Peter, yeah.
I just wanted you folks to know on the clean election question, the difference, there is a huge difference between the House that these gentlemen are running for and the Senate. You know, you've got, what, 3 towns? 4 towns. I got 12. That's why it's more money for the Senate.
Okay. Thank you. So what's going to happen is I'm going to ask a question, and then those who have, if let me do this. I'll put my glasses on. Is there anyone who at least would raise your hand and say, I have a question, I've not yet asked the question? Would you at least raise your hand, because I'm going to go to second turn. So everyone who is interested in asking a question for the first time is out, okay? So I'm going to ask a question. It's going to be about Bucksport in a minute. And then those of you who have already asked a question can take a second question up, okay? Because that's been the moderator's plan all along. Okay. Because Bucksport is now, I think, both in the Senate race and in the House race, am I right, Peter? It's new territory. So here's my question. What do you see as the biggest challenge in Bucksport? And it could be maybe 1 or 2 things, okay, but let's not go more than 2 each. And then what would you do about it should you be elected? And I'm going to go, first of all, to Mr. Lyford, and then to Mr. Russell, and then to Mr. Hutchins. Mr. Lyford.
So probably some of it, you know, is the Penobscot River from Holtrichem, the cleanup that they're talking about. I wouldn't touch the river. That's one thing, to keep Bucksport the way it is. I think that what is in the river by now has been covered over, so I wouldn't touch it. That would help Bucksport. The other thing is you've got a mill here that hasn't been developed completely. You know, I'd like to see Perk expand, because I think Perk's an important, very important to this town. And recently I've read that the landfill may be opened up, so I think that will help Bucksport tremendously if that can come true.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. Mr. Russell.
Well, since I do a lot of work here, I would say that Bucksport's on the right path, and I think there are many things working that'll improve the town. As far as what the biggest challenges are, I think that the challenge is that, I'll give one example. This is Verona, but I talked with the town clerk of Verona, and last year she told me that of all the houses sold, only one of the houses was what she called local, that came from Bucksport. Every other house was people that are moving here, which is great. I mean, I think it's what we need. But at the same time, I think that, you know, we have to make sure that Bucksport as it stands, its affordability and everything else, does not become someplace else where local people are pushed out. I think it's really important that we're cognizant, and I'm happy to say that all the people that I've worked with on the council and economic development and many of the nonprofits seem to be on the same page. Yes, there will be a challenge. The permitted landfill that's here, it's going to be a decision for the town. And I did speak with a lobsterman the other day to what Peter talked about, and there is a proposal, I guess, to dig it up, haul it out into the middle of the bay, and dump it there. And that lobsterman convinced me that that makes 0 sense. And so I do believe that is a challenge. There are other challenges along the way. The only other thing that AIM owns is the water rights. And there are dams in those water rights that are not being taken care of. That is a challenge for the area, because it would change one of the lakes in that sort of stream. Alamoosic would become a stream. It wouldn't be what it is today. And so this is a big challenge throughout the area. And I think that those are things, I do agree that the river and the landfill are two big questions for the town. And
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins.
Yes, I think some of the things that Bucksport is famous for, if that's the right way to put it, is its people and how well they've run the town of Penobscot. It's a mill town, or was a mill town. Was proud of being a mill town, and it's still ready to do something on that mill site that will be maybe a fish farm, maybe not, depending on what goes in there. But as Peter talked about, the Ultrachem project that's going on there, their closure has been accepted by the courts, and I've been working with them for the last 18 months or so, I guess, because I represent Prospect, Stockton Springs, Verona Island, Orland, so I was kind of in the loop with the area and what they're doing and what they want to do. And we certainly don't want to stir up mercury residue and send it down the river. I think one of their proposals is to block off the area that they think it may be seeping from the worst, and then they're looking for other projects to help the area, and that's one of the things they've been talking with me about. So I think Bucksport has a great future, full of great people.
All right, but two things that you see that you would do as a legislator representing Bucksport for the first time.
Well, one of them would be to see to it that we carry through on that project on the river, expand the boat facility, and finally put a suicide fence on the bridge.
Thank you. All right. There are people who ask questions. One question already. Are any of you interested in asking a second question? If so, would you just raise your hand so I can gauge where I am with the clock? There's 1, 2, and I think I saw a third hand maybe in that row. So there are 3 people who have now an opportunity for a second question, because the first, everyone has waived their thing. So I think Mr. Schelling, I saw your hand first. Please come forward.
Thank you very much, Doctor. There's a recent Supreme Court decision that focused on the issue of public funding of students going to religious schools in Maine. I'd like to get your takes on whether it's appropriate for Maine to pay for religious schooling for the students, and if so, how you'd go about paying that. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Mr. Russell, and then Mr. Hutchins, and then to Mr. Lyford, please. Mr. Russell.
so the way I understand that issue was that it was for a place that didn't offer a school, Verona Island. We do not have any schools at all. We need to send our children someplace else, and the town pays for it. And we've tried to have choice on the island locally, and it's been to Bucksport, which has been fine for us. I guess, as a matter of principle, if in our situation, if that religious school could not have a sort of a basis of religious training, which is not what our public schools do, and met all the requirements of our public school, including the choice of special education, so that it would not be that if you had a special education child, they would be unable to go to that school, but maybe their neighbor could. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess I'd say that maybe if the right things were met, that would be okay, but unless they were, I would be opposed to it.
All right, we're going to go next to Mr. Hutchins.
Public funding in my community for high school kids is just that, because we don't have a high school in Penobscot anymore. The last high school class in Penobscot, I think, graduated in Penobscot High School in 1956, maybe. And so we send students all over the place, and we pay what we pay for the other area schools. I think it probably is average now. I'm not sure, because Blue Hill is quite a lot more money than Bucksport is at this point, and we send students to both. And if there was a religious school in the area that the parents wanted the students to go to, they should certainly be able to go to it, and the money should go towards that. I don't see any difference whatsoever whether we're paying for education in a school that is religious-based, or whether it is part of the public school system. I had an argument recently, and when I say argument, I don't mean loud argument. We were discussing it on the floor of the House with the chair of the Education Committee for the state of Maine, and his name is Mike Brennan from Portland. And I was making the point that if we continue to keep adding regulations and requirements to public schools, the population of public schools will be special education children only, because the parents are going to remove their kids from schools that have regulations that they will not deal with, such as mandatory vaccines and things of that nature. And Mike jumped in the air and said that we give far too much emphasis in the opinions of parents in educating their children. I have the quote in the book with me here. And I was so shocked that I was speechless for a short while, and for me that's pretty good. That he would say that out loud, that parents have way too much influence in the education of their children. To me, that disqualifies him as being a representative of any school children.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. Mr. Lyford.
Yeah, in the town of Eddington, we have several choices. You know, you can go to Hamden, or you can go to Brewer, or you can go to John Bapps. I'm very pleased with the Supreme Court decision. I think that if the religious schools have to meet the criteria of the state, so they have to follow, you know, the state rules. You had said something like the state paying for it. The state doesn't pay for it. Each town pays for it.
Partially reimbursed at the state. Under the mill.
All right. There was a second hand up for a second turn. Would you step to the microphone, please?
David Weeder from Bucksport again, and somewhat a follow-up on my original question, and after just hearing Mr. Hutchins' statement about a gentleman named Mike, who you said was concerned about parents having too much input. I'm going to put my cards on the table, and my first question was phrased as a yes or no question, and that's really what I wanted. I did not need any further explanation as to anyone's answer, and I always feel a little concerned when I'm in a public political forum where religion is brought up. And I'm I don't know how I can phrase my statement or question to all three candidates, because I'd like to just ask a specific question.
Why don't you state the question, and then I'll try to...
We'll try to work with it. Mr. Lyford.
No, I want you to just ask the question, David. Please.
Okay. When someone answers a yes or no question with an answer that then explains their answer based on their religious belief, that is an insult to who knows how many people are in the room. Those who might share the same exact religion are pleased to hear the answer. Others who are in absolute opposition or in a different place than that particular religion have perhaps been insulted. And that includes young people that might listen to this and hear a candidate from the stage make a statement that says that they could not support same-sex marriage because it is in conflict with their spirituality, their religion. I think we all need to remember there is a very good reason why we have a separation of church and state in this country.
So, David, just very succinctly, if you would, with all due respect.
Okay.
Please put what you're saying in a question.
Okay.
I think, and just hear me out, you're asking if one's personal belief system should influence how they function as a legislator. Is that somewhat in the neighborhood?
Right, and what really caused me to have some great concern was in the answer that was given on the abortion question, which was...
Right, I heard that.
Yeah, it was in conflict. You said you would not support same-sex marriage because you are a Christian, and so you could not support that. On the answer to the abortion question, you said you would let the law stand as it is, even though you are opposed to it.
Okay, so let's get to the question.
Okay, well, the question is please consider that you are representing a diverse community of people. All of our faith beliefs, or lack thereof, are completely diverse and should be kept personal. It's not a stage for any candidate to expound on their religious beliefs.
So that's still not really a question. So I'm going to give you.
I don't know how to ask a question.
Are you okay? Okay.
No, I'm making an acknowledgement of something that occurred in a room full of people.
And that's all duly noted.
Okay.
But the purpose of the mic is to ask a question.
Would you consider on forums from here on out to not allow your personal religious beliefs, and I'm talking to all three of you, to ever influence how you would frame an answer to a question that might in some way insult, marginalize, or somehow demean any citizens in your district?
Okay, and because, Mr. Lyford, I'm going to go to you. David, I hope I helped not. I helped to get to this in all fairness. All right, Mr. Lyford, and then Mr. Hutchins, and then Mr. Russell.
I think it's important for you to know your state senator and where he stands on the issues. You know exactly where I stand on the issues. And if you call me and want to change a law, we can discuss that. But again, you know how I stand on the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford. Mr. Hutchins?
Thank you. Of course, it's impossible to express your opinion and keep your faith out of it. You know, I'm an old sinner saved by grace. You know, that affects everything I do. And so, you know, naturally, that affects it.
So it influences how you would represent citizens. Is that I'm just want to get clear.
Well, it would influence how I talk about it, at least, and why when I talked about the abortion issue,
right,
I said that over a number of years we're going to have a whole bunch of questions about that and votes on it, and it probably is going to come down something like what, I guess it's Mississippi or Texas that is in the Supreme Court right now with.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Russell.
Well, I think this is a little harder for me. I certainly respect people's religious beliefs. Mine are probably more unformed than maybe the other candidate. It's hard for me to answer this question because I'm not exactly sure what it is, and I wouldn't approach answers that way, but it doesn't mean that other people can't be influenced to make their decisions that way. I guess I would have to respect people in their decisions and disagree where I feel I need to disagree, and work towards what I feel is right. And in general, I do not feel the government should be involved in a woman's right to her own body, who we love, who we want to marry. That doesn't look like a way that the government should act, nor legislate.
Thank you,
So-
Mr. Russell. I thought I saw one more hand. Did you? I'm talking to the woman. Did you have another question, or was I? This is like the auction. If you even scratch your head, you've got a question. So there was no other. I know, but she hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to go back to that in just a moment. I'm going to, you spoke once before. I'm honoring the people who have already, come up. And please keep it in a question form, everyone.
Unfortunately, I mean, both of you, some of you have mentioned, where are all the people who aren't working? We need more people here working. Where are other people? And you've also mentioned drugs. Unfortunately, many of our children are suffering from their parents' substance use disorder with addictions to alcohol and drugs, and the domestic violence that results from those alcohol and drugs. Our schools are doing an amazing job, I think especially in Bucksport, but some of these children are not going to succeed and grow up, but they'll repeat what they learned despite all that work. I'm wondering what role you see government playing to help these children and their families, because we have intergenerational poverty and trauma, and it affects the workforce.
Mr. Russell?
So recently there was a breakfast that United Way had, its annual breakfast, and they had a woman come to speak about generational poverty. I don't remember her name offhand, but her life story was amazing. And she grew up in a family in, I think it was Louisiana. At the age of 26, she was illiterate. She went on to school and got her doctorate. And she comes to Maine occasionally to run sort of these programs about intergenerational poverty. I learned more in that morning than I've learned in the rest of my life about it. And her approach was unique and different and effective. So I guess what I would say is that there are people out there that I think deal with this. Tracy in her schools do an amazing job. But I think we need, there was a survey in the Bangor Daily and I filled it out, and one of the questions was, how would you deal with this? And I said I would deal with it in all the ways that I know. And that would be in treatment, in enforcement of, drugs themselves, and that there was sufficient programs to help people escape this sickness. And I think it's a problem that's eating at our country, and we have to do something about it, but we've got to learn more about it. at least I need to learn more about as a legislator. And so I will try to do that. I will try to spend the money wisely, and I don't think we can deal with it in our jails. I don't think we can deal with it fully in our schools. There has to be from every angle. We have to, you know, work on this problem. And this approach that she had was so different. It was just, a lot of it she talked about was the terms that people hear when they're locked into that. And they don't even know how to get out of it. I mean, she gave examples of how people talk to them. She gave an example of when they go to the DHS. I only went there once. It was something to do with a car. I had to get something. And this was long before COVID or anything like that. But all the people are behind plexiglass. And the people that were sitting there looked forlorn and like they were trapped. And it wasn't welcoming. It wasn't like there was a solution. It was like, it's just, this is the world you're in and you're in it. And we've got to fix that.
Okay, to be clear, your question's about generational poverty, right? Or intergenerational? Because I heard one of the candidates asking to be clarified. So would you just clarify quickly what it is that you're asking?
Well, I'm asking about what can the government do to help with intergenerational poverty and trauma, the trauma that comes from alcohol and drug addiction? Otherwise, it's intergenerational.
I hope that now we're clear. Mr. Lyford, you're next, followed by Mr. Hutchins.
Well, it was difficult to hear, but, you know, I had a young man work for me that, you know, obviously had got on a drug problem. I offered to pay his way to any drug thing, and he said, you know, he just would not admit he had a problem. And there's a ton of these people who will not admit they've got a problem. You know, and I don't think really giving out crack pipes and syringes by this governor was the right thing to do. And I'm also mixed on Narcan. You know, my granddaughter graduated from the University of Maine, said she'd gone to several parties where on the door it said Narcan available. I mean, boy, it's a tough decision. I mean, it does save lives, but do you do it over and over and over to the same person? I hope I answered what you asked. I couldn't.
Thank you, Mr. Lyford.
I just couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Actually, I'm asking, what about how do you stop it from going to the next generation? How do we keep it from going to the children of these people?
It's got to be education. It's got to be education, you know, through the parents. Number one is the parent. We as parents are not taking and understanding, having our children understand the damage this will do. That's the first thing, and then on to the education of the teachers.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins.
Yes. I've been working the last couple of years with Bill Diamond, who has a real passion for fixing DHHS. He has been a state representative and a state senator for years. He's down the central part of the state. I can't remember the town that he's from, but he has a heart as big as all our doors to try to win them. Okay. He's a Democrat, good friend of mine, and I have told him that I'll do anything I possibly can to help him to stop, you know, just what you're talking about. And this year, he brought together a bunch of us, and he brought a proposal to the DHHS, or to the legislature, to split the DHHS up into 3 groups so that it could be handled better. It is so enormous that, I mean, it's 2/3 of the money we spend, you know, it all gets tied up in that. And children get lost in it. In my district over in Stockton Springs, I lost 2 young children over there that just breaks your heart. We went to visit with the grandmother of one of the little boys that the courts told her that she had to give it back to the mother, and of course you know what happened after that. But in the legislature, when that bill came forward last spring, Bill's own party and his own committee chair of DHHS took his bill and rewrote it so as to do quite a number of the things that he was asking for in his regulations, except split it up. And that's what passed. It may make for, a little better proposal, but Bill has been studying this for decades, because he's been in and out of the legislature, stay out of term and back in, 6 and 8 years, and he really knows it well. And until we stop providing drugs from an open border in the South, that might be the very best process that we can start, and that's not going to happen until we change presidents.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. Now, everyone who had a second question has spoken, so I'm going to call on Nancy MAINE, who's asking a question, and then I'm going to have some closing protocols to follow here.
I'm Nancy MAINE from Bucksport. Voting is a fundamental right, the right to vote in a democracy. So I've been thinking about your thoughts on voting laws, and as many states across the United States are legislating more restrictive voting laws in their states, I'd like you each to consider Maine's voting laws, and if there are some that you would consider putting more restrictions on, in your opinion, to make it a more fair and just elections.
Mr. Hutchins, Mr. Russell, Mr. Lyford.
Thank you for your question. Maine is relatively blessed with elections that don't get tampered with very much, because it's mostly small communities where people know everyone, and that makes it a little easier to do that. We also, our counting machines are strictly that, counting machines. They're not hooked to the internet, can't be tampered with. But we do have some problems with the way elections are run occasionally. I had put a bill in this last year so that absentee ballots couldn't be opened until after closing on election day. And the reason I did it is because when you do an absentee ballot, maybe you did one a week ago, and this week you've changed your mind, you can go back in. That ballot is still yours, got your name on it. You can take it and change your vote and put it back in. Well, Maine allows these small towns, I think 2 days ahead of time, to open these and get them all neat and in a pile. They can't count them, but they can get them all neat in a pile so they can feed them through the machine quicker. I understand that. But the problem with it is if you go in on election day, 7 o'clock at night, and you give your name Joe Smith, and they go through the file and they say, you've already voted. You see, if they hadn't opened the envelopes and piled them up, they could go to Joe Smith and you could say, that's not my signature.
Right.
Or maybe it's a different Joe Smith. It might be very simple. That would be a little bit of an improvement. I don't think it would make a difference of 10 votes in the whole state. So that wasn't my thinking. Voting is so important that it needs to be very accurate. And I wouldn't be at all opposed to having, to put your license or something of that to prove who you are. You have to, when you sign up to vote, you have to prove who you are, so that when you go to the polls, it really wouldn't be much of a job to do the same thing over again.
Thank you.
So that's a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
So, just one quick thing. I don't know, I watched a 60 Minutes episode this last week, and it was about voting and voting machines. And from what I understand, they said that night there are no voting machines connected to the internet. So, I guess I feel I've had the privilege to talk to Matt Dunlap a couple of times through the years, and he seemed like a really reasonable guy, and we talked about voting, and we talked about how it went in the state. I feel it's secure. I feel it works. What Sherm was trying to do, I don't really know. I mean, the thing that came to mind to me, he said if, you know, sort of they're piled up and people come in and then all of a sudden they can change them. Maybe they stayed sealed, and somebody can check the signature, and, I mean, maybe if they're gonna change their vote, but it looks to me like that could maybe happen in mass. I mean, I've been to hearings before, and you sort of think about unintended consequences. So I haven't done an absentee ballot, but if I did and I voted, I would have feel like I voted.
Thank you. Mr. Lyford, quickly?
Yeah, I'm not aware of many problems here within the state. I am in favor of voter ID. Actually, the problem lies within this room. Let's raise our hands of how many poll watchers participate. How many people are poll watchers? I mean, you got to participate, you know? Look, 3, 4, 5. You know, that's what, to ensure of good elections, we need participation on both parties, all parties. So that's what I would come up with.
Thank you. In a moment, we're going to come to close. Okay. I'm watching the clock. I see 2 hands, and I need to get to closing statements. And so if you have a question, go to the microphone and speak into it. State your name. And Hans, if you have a question, you need to come up front, please.
This is just a clarification question, because
Sure.
it seems to me that one of the questions was not answered in yes or no, except for one candidate. So the question was about the woman's right to choose, and 2 of the candidates answered kind of in a murky way. So my question is, if you had the opportunity, if the opportunity was given to you in the legislature to overturn the right to choose for women in this state, would you take that opportunity for whatever reason? And please do not tell me what other states might do or what you think, you fantasize that the country will do at some point in 10 years or 50 years. What would you do? Would you take the opportunity to overturn the women's right to choose?
That's going to be a yes or no question.
A yes or no question.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Mr. Hutchins, Mr. Lyford, and then Mr. Russell. A yes or no?
Yes or no?
If you had the opportunity to restrict a woman's right to an abortion or totally eliminate, would you vote to restrict or overturn it? And it's a yes or no question.
I would restrict more than it is now.
But a yes or no?
That's the answer.
Okay. Peter?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
I would not vote to change the law.
Okay. Hans, you need to get up here quickly because I got to get to closing statements.
Hans Frischel, citizen here. Really quick question. First of all, I just have to say I think either Fox News or CNN would have a field day fact-checking this forum. There'd be a lot one way or the other. My question goes back to something fundamental under a lot of the questions and statements here. And the question is this: if you guys were in a room with the Founding Fathers, now I grew up believing passionately, I was taught by every teacher, kindergarten through high school, about the separation of church and state. If you were in a room with the Founding Fathers and you had a chance to voice an opinion on that concept, separation of church and state, which way would you have voted? If in favor of it, why? If not in favor, why not?
So this is, are you in favor of separation of church and state?
Yes.
Okay, and it's going to be that simple. And I'll start with Mr. Russell.
I am in favor.
Mr. Lyford.
I am not in favor of separation.
Mr. Hutchins.
I just think it's impossible to separate it, that's all.
All right, thank you. All right, so in a moment, and I'm watching the clock, we are going to ask each candidate to answer this question. In your closing statement, why should the people in these districts that you are a candidate vote for you? And I'll give you a moment or two to think through that. Meanwhile, I want to announce a couple of things that you should know about. There's been some discussion tonight about neighbors taking care of neighbors and food and whatever. In Brown Hall on Thanksgiving Day, there will be a completely free traditional Thanksgiving dinner offered here between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And it is not income dependent. The chef will be Brother Donald and his crew from the Franciscan Friars, and it will be provided here. It's not by seatings. By that I mean you don't have to sign up for 11 or 12 or 1 or 2, okay? Come as you are. If you know anyone in your sphere of influence who might be alone or might just want to be with other people, we're dedicated to full inclusion in Brown Hall. My preaching goes on next door. Brown Hall is committed to a non-religious, non-ideological, non-partisan, community building effort. We help people whether you are an atheist or a true believer. That we don't ask those questions. You are welcome here. Secondly, on November the 1st, I would like you to notice that not only on the walls here, but in the hallway, Brown Hall is not only a center for community building, but for the cultural arts. And there are a number of artists locally who for years have done artwork and had no place to show them. And so Brown Hall has offered to these artists. They meet on Wednesday mornings at, I believe it's 10:30 to noon or so. It's not a class, but people are given an opportunity to come in and work on art projects. And I think it has beautified and enhanced this historic building. And we are on the registry of historic places. And so on November the 1st, the Know Your Neighbor program will be a panel of the artists who choose to be present, who talk about their art, and then they will be able to, I don't know, point out their art, or there will be time afterwards. And we are going to also have a reception in their honor. These are people who have done things for years. They've not, and now it's on exhibition. And I know that the Crumpet has got it going down there, and they are, the things that are at the Crumpet are for sale. And we welcome anyone that wants to get involved in whatever is going on in Bucksport. We're not in competition, we're in collaboration. So on November the 1st, which will be our Know Your Neighbor night. And the reason we're doing that, we usually do Know Your Neighbor on the second Tuesday of the month, but as you know, that's election day. And I do have a brain in my head. I know no one is gonna wanna be here for anything. You're going to all be glued to the tube or something, finding out what's going on. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to go to the closing statements, and I'm going to begin with Mr. Lyford. I'm going to then go to Mr. Hutchins, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Russell. I'm going to ask you to keep it to 1 to 2 minutes, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for showing up this evening. I appreciate it. I think I laid out pretty good to you in the beginning, my involvement as a select board member, involvement in the church, involvement with the Boy Scouts of America, my time with the Brewer Federal Credit Union, and 8 years in the House. So I would say my experience would be something that you should consider voting for, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you.
The moderator would also remind people that Mr. Cammack, who is the Democratic candidate, called at 2:10 p.m. to tell me with regret he would not be here tonight. That's just a point of information, because you see an empty chair. All right, we're going to go next to, who did I say? Mr. Hutchins, yes.
I guess when I started, I didn't tell you much about my personal life. I live in Penobscot. I'm married to Patty. She happens to be sitting right here.
Speak right into the mic.
Oh, I gotta do that.
Yeah, please.
I'm kind of loud, so sometimes I don't have to.
It needs to be taped, though, that's why.
I got you. I'm married to Patricia, who's sitting right over there. She's famous for her squash donuts. We made them this morning for the state workers. They were replacing the culvert at our house. I worked at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft after school, helping design the engines for the F-15 and the Boeing 707. Prior to establishing my own business here in Maine in 1968, I built homes for 25 years, and some of them right here in Bucksport, and sometimes repaired homes here in Bucksport and that type of thing. Then I worked the next 20 years at the Wilson Museum in Castine, associated with the restoration of the John Perkins House, redesigning the museum campus, repurposing a barn that I built in the 1980s for a family that then the museum bought the property, and for what is now called the Hutchins Education Center. For the last 30 years, I've served as moderator for several towns in the area and in this district. Like I say, I have my wife, 3 children, the spouses that they chose, the 10 grandchildren that they have blessed me with. 3 of them are here today, and 2 great-grandchildren.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Russell. Speak directly into the mic, please.
So I appreciate that I had this opportunity to speak to you all tonight, and thank you for that. Really, throughout my life, I consider myself to be somebody that can listen to people, that can work with people, and then get things done. I've found that in my work. We grew from 23 people that I started with to over 500. We got there doing that. After retiring, the work we've done in Bucksport, I see a gentleman here that's on economic development with me, Steve, that and Tracy are both trying to get to the council, but I've found that in this town, the work that everybody's doing looks like it's in the same direction, and it's collaborative, and it's getting things done. I don't really know any other way. I'm a moderate, I'm a middle-of-the-road guy. I like to work with everybody. I feel I can talk with everybody. I feel that I can hear them. So that's what I hope to do in Augusta, if I get there. So I hope it's that way. It sounds like Sherm talked about, some of the things they've done together. I did look at voting records. It looked to me like there is a divide. It looks like, but I didn't look at everybody. I looked at sort of where they were. But I hope to be able to do a different path. I hope to be there, and the time is useful, and that I can address some of these many issues we've talked about, and work with others to do that. That's what I'm used to doing, and I'm used to being successful. And I would certainly appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. In a moment, I'm going to invite applause as we begin to close this. I want to do one other thing. The Thanksgiving dinner that I mentioned, we just need you to call us and make a reservation. It will be on the marquee, if it's not already on the marquee, down at the Alamo for the next month. It will have the phone number. Call and just say, we're coming, how many are coming, we can plan appropriately. I want to thank, first of all, the candidates, Mr. Hutchins, Mr. Lyford, Mr. Russell, for showing up tonight, and for all of you who participated. I also want to thank my executive assistant who has, yes. You can stand up, Johanna. She reminds me she's the boss and I just mop up messes around here. I'm the janitor. No, we have a good time. If you need any help, folks, you don't have to be a religious person. Call us. Whatever we can do. We have a medical equipment program here. We give or lend medical equipment to anybody that needs it. And again, Brown Hall is committed to civility, building community. We're not here to preach in this room. We are here to help. So I'm going to ask now that you join me in giving a solid round of applause to our candidates. To those of you who have been watching by way of YouTube, this has been the public forum for the Senate and House candidates in Bucksport, Maine, at Brown Hall Center for Community and the Cultural Arts. My name is Dr. Stephen York. I've served as moderator. Thank you who have joined us by way of the internet. And to our audience, thank you very much. Good evening, and be safe going home.